For teachers, when they have a student in the class that's LGBTQ with a disability, it's really important for them to not be passive when they might hear a student, talking about their sexuality, or maybe another student is making a negative comment about people with disabilities or people who are LGBTQ. So it's really important for teachers to cut that language and that behavior off from the beginning and tell the rest of the students that that language isn't acceptable, and that they need to respect all of their classmates. And I think oftentimes teachers feel like it might not be their place to say something, but for that student, it's going to mean the world to know that the adult that's in charge supports them, and that if they get in trouble, if they need help, they know that you are someone that they can feel safe going to. So whether that means coming in the middle and saying, please, don't use that language, or maybe if you heard a conversation, maybe if you happen to see that student sort of on their own, maybe just say, I'm here if you'd like to talk.
Well, I say in my, I have criteria that I follow, and it's for case management, it's for teachers. If you have somebody that you're teaching or someone that you're supporting that is GLBTQIA, I hope that you can give them directions or say, there's a wonderful group at your local Pride Center or in your community that supports people with disabilities that are GLBTQIA, and take that initiative to take them to their first meeting, or give them a ride and say, here is the meeting. Introduce that to them. That would be the first step. That would be a great step for any teachers or case management.
I think there are definitely barriers for coming out for people who have a disability, whether it's in their family life, with professionals, and especially in the medical environment. Typically, in my experience, when someone comes out to, say, a doctor or a therapist and they have a disability, they're often sort of told, well, do you really even understand what that means? And they're given sort of definitely like patronizing responses to them trying to express their identity. And there's sort of a myth that people with disabilities are not interested in sex, or that they're all straight. So there are absolutely barriers. And for people that have staff that are with them for most hours of the day, that is also challenging, because you have to sort of work with that individual staff person's personal biases, and you don't really have an option necessarily of saying, I don't feel comfortable working with the staff person, because there's often limited availability, and if you need services, you kind of sometimes have to hide some things about you, or not be as vocal about things, just so that you can get through your day with the supports that you need.
What I love about Safe Space is that we strive to have an inclusive movement, and we represent LGBTQ folks who have experienced violence, and in that it is important for us to look at what we call those who are most impacted. And what we mean by that is people who experience violence at the highest rates. And we don't mean, some people will use the word vulnerable. They'll say the most vulnerable. We push against that. We say that it's not that someone is vulnerable. Like, a lot of the people who experience violence at the highest rates are some of the strongest, most resilient people among us. So it's not that they're vulnerable. I mean, there are factors that make them more exposed to violence than other communities, but it's that they're impacted. And so what can we do to go into communities where violence is happening and make it so that the people and systems around them support their well-being and their health and their safety? And what the disability community is teaching us is that there is a lack of information and education that is being shared with people with disabilities, that people with disabilities can struggle to access spaces where they're safe and can be who they are. And how can we make our presence more readily accessible to folks? So I would say that our whole movement, that who we are as a program, who we are as people, is informed and inspired by what the people we work with from the disability community are telling us that they need. And ways that we've responded to that, one is to try to build meaningful relationships with disability rights partners across the state, so that if somebody comes to us, rather than just sending them to another system or another program, we can send them to a person. We can send them to Karen Topper. We can send them to Rose. We can send them to colleagues that we know and trust, and do warm handoffs with people, so that the navigating, accessing resources becomes something that is less scary and that is kinder and more personal. So that's something that we do. And the other thing we do is to always center people with disabilities in our conversations. So when we're talking about what our goal is as a program, who we are as advocates, what our vision is for the provider, for this movement as providers, we never do that without talking about and centering the experiences of folks with disabilities.